Welcome to Colaiste Online, and today we're going to be taking a look at the muscle system, specifically taking a look at just the basic introduction to muscles and the sort of questions I might ask in an exam or assignment as kind of a end of year thing. Now, what it is looking like it's going to happen this year is instead of exams, we're going to have assignments submitted to you, put up on Moodle, that you will download, complete, and return before the end of April. That is the plan, certainly. We will have a couple other things to talk about if people are available to pop on and ask questions. I will be trying to do these around 12 o'clock. It is later today, unfortunately, but that's a function of me fixing email difficulties that people are having. If you're in one of my classes and you've not contacted your class teacher by email in response to the emails they've sent out, please contact your class teacher. Please check your emails. Thank you kindly. Now, a muscle system. Well, we're talking about the skeleton previously. Now let's talk a little bit about what powers the skeleton, what moves the skeleton around the place. Among other things that it does is the muscle system. Now your muscle system is over 600 muscles in the human body, making up 40 to 50% of your body weight, more if you're, swole, and less if you're more svelte. There are, broadly speaking, three types of muscle. Now you do not need to know and able to name all 600 muscles in the human body. I will not ask you to know all of them or know even most of them. There's a couple of big ones that pop up, like the biceps brachii, the trapezius. It's like pectoralis major. They're the kind of ones that you might know just from things like where your pecs are. Here, your trapezius is back of the neck here. The biceps brachii, your biceps there. That's all relatively speaking straightforward. Muscles have five main functions. They generate the force to move the body. Remember we were talking about skeleton, how without the skeleton animals struggle to move. Without skeletal muscle, the muscles basically generating the force to move the body around. Like without that, animals are sessile. Give me some examples. Even like the most sessile are the mollusks, which cling to the side of boats. They can't move, or what little they can move is the muscle inside them. They've almost no muscle for moving around, so they're pretty much immotile. Question for the chat there, Alex. I would be shocked if we were back on the 29th of March. We have not been officially extended yet, but I would be shocked if we were back. I anticipate this is going to go on for a little longer than that. I would be shocked if we were back on the 29th. If you're wondering about different ways to submit assignments, we're working on that, and we will hope to have word for you shortly. But I'd be shocked if we're back on the 29th of March. Muscles are there to basically push around. Like absent skeleton, or absent skeleton, you can move around a bit. Absent muscles, no motion is basically possible. You could look at trees as an example of not an animal but a life form that doesn't really possess muscle. What little movement trees are capable of is due to usually hydraulic pressures and stuff pushing yourself around, and that's kind of it. Muscles also maintain posture. They allow us to stand upright or hold ourselves in a particular position. When you're standing up, you engage a bunch of muscles in your system. You don't ever think about it, but you are engaging it. You learn to do that as a baby. You internalize in your cerebellum, and you can stand up. And then you don't have to think about the muscles, you tense and relax. But if I severed your spinal cord, all of a sudden you'd fall over and you wouldn't be able to stand anymore because you can't tense those muscles anymore. Muscles provide heat for the body, one of the big sources of heat. The other major heat source in the body is chemical reactions inside the liver. If you're cold because you just woke up in the morning, or it's cold out, or it's cold temperature, or whatever, move around a little bit. The muscles will break down glucose to produce ATP to move you around, and in the process of doing that will generate a small amount of waste heat, and that waste heat will warm you up, will increase your body temperature. So If we talked about getting cold as well before, physiologic reactions to hypothermia, being too cold, your muscles will start to vibrate and you'll start to shiver. That doesn't move you around the place, it just, you shake a little bit. What that does do is it generates a small amount of waste heat that raises your body temperature. Your liver is the other thing that's mostly there to heat yourself. So your liver and your muscles together, that's what warms you up when you're cold. Moving around. Muscles also help pump blood and lymph around the body. Now, we talked about the cardiovascular system previously, but to recap very briefly, the big cool pump of the body is the heart. It pumps the blood around the body and down to your feet and back up to the heart again, around a big track. And that's the big cool one that everyone knows about. But I also mentioned the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is pumped around, this is your immune system, pumped around by exercise, which is why it's valuable to exercise. It keeps your immune system more active because your lymph is pumping around. That enables materials that get stuck in the lymph, like bacteria, viruses, fungi, encounter your white blood cells, because hey, lymph nodes, that's where a lot of your white blood cells are. They fight. Your lymph nodes will swell up if you're a little bit ill. So often you feel yourself a little bit sick, feel your lymph nodes. If they're feeling swollen, hey, they're that's because they're full of pus, because all the white blood cells and the bacteria, viruses or fungi or whatever, are meeting up, fighting, they're dying, they're killing each other off, and they're needing it pumped away, that fluid taken away. Alright. Muscles also push food into the digestive tract. You do one conscious swallow, where you first swallow food, you swallow it, and then all the way down your esophagus, the muscles in the motion called peristalsis are pushing the food down until it gets to your stomach. That's the first conscious decision. After that, it's completely unconscious. Irritation in those smooth muscles pushes the material down until it gets down into your stomach. Alright, what about muscles is unusual? Well, the first thing is contractibility. Muscles can shorten and thicken. So if you got basically, your bicep here and you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to tense my bicep, and it gets shorter and thicker and it bulges up a bit there in the middle. Okay, so what happens is you tense the muscle there, it gets shorter and thicker. So it's most obvious in your bicep where there's a belly in the muscle, where the thing pulls in and it raises up there. Okay, elasticity. The muscle tissue can return to their normal shape and length after contraction or extension. If you stretch the muscle, or it contracts, and you take off that tension, boink, it springs back to its original size. Much like elastic in your underpants or trousers, you pull it out, you let it go, slaps back to its original shape, original length. Excitability, now that's one of the most interesting ones. We've talked about the nerve system with sending its impulses around to trigger your body to basically move. And the way it does that is it gives your muscles little electric shocks. So when you shock the muscle, as long as you're putting that shock into that muscle tenses. You take that shock away, that muscle relaxes. So is there an off signal? Is there a relax signal to the muscles? No. There's just a tense signal. You send the signal to the muscles tense. You stop that signal, the muscles relax. And in most of the muscles in your body, they're an antagonistic pair. That means when one is tensing, like I want to tense my fingers here, I excite the muscles here. They contract, it pulls my finger in. I want to straighten it out. I've got muscles extensors down here in the arm, and they straighten my finger out for me. Sever those muscles, I lose access to that motion. If I sever the nerves going in, I damage the nerves. That means the electrical impulses can't travel on, can't get there, won't tense. It also means if I reach out and I touch a wire that's live, the electric current running it immediately, hand closes around it. Can I let go? I can't. The electrical shock is causing my muscles to tense. So I hold that there, I try to let go and I can't. You ever think there's a lot of wire that's live and you're worried about it, and you always had a rubber gloves on instead of rubber shoes? You touch it with the back of your hand. That way, shock, pull it away. Because you're not touching it. Your hand can't close around it. Alright? Extensibility. When the muscle is able to stretch, it can stretch longer if need be. Because remember we're talking about antagonistic pairs, one contracting, if one's contracting getting shorter, the other one by definition has to lengthen. So they can lengthen, and then let go, they spring back to their original shape and size via elasticity. So it's the 4 characteristics of muscle tissue. Basically stretching, relaxing, springing back to their original size, elasticity, excitability. They're triggered by electrical impulses. It also means, doesn't matter how tough you are, you get hit with a big enough electric shock, your muscles hold tense, spasm, fall over. That's the theory behind tasers. The practice of tasers is a little bit different due to a variety of factors, but the theory behind tasers is you deliver electric shock. Now, why don't tasers work? People can be too big. People can have too thick a layer of fat on them. You can have a problem where you only got one prong into them. You'll notice most tasers 2 prongs. Unless both of those prongs go into you, it doesn't work because it's got to create a circuit for the electricity to travel around. If only one prong goes in, you do not get half the shock. You get no shock. Both prongs have to go in you before you get a significant shock. Now, muscle structure. Muscles are a little like sausages inside sausages inside sausages in a weird way. There are 3 layers of connective tissue that each muscle gets. Around the outside of the whole muscle, you get the epimysium. It's a layer of connective tissue containing collagen fibers. Its theory is to separate muscles from surrounding tissue to prevent muscles sticking and adhering to each other as they regrow. So if you get little muscle tears, you can sometimes have muscle adhesions happening where the muscle sticks to one another. You don't want that because that breaks your ability for the muscles to slide over themselves, because you've got muscles that have to slide over themselves. Legs, hands have a lot when they've got a lot of different motions available to them. So they're there to prevent that. The perimysium is a sheath of connective tissues that groups the muscle fibers into bundles. So you get bundles of muscle fibers together. So if I tore off the epimysium, I'd see loads of little bundles wrapped in muscle fiber wrapped in perimysium. And if I pull them apart, inside each one of those, I'd see bundles of endomysium, which are thin layers of areolar connective tissue can cover each individual muscle fiber. So basically layers upon layers upon layers. Now, muscle types break down to 3 sorts. The last one's the most famous, voluntary or skeletal muscle. But you got the involuntary muscle, the smooth muscle, the cardiac muscle, only found in the heart, and the voluntary muscle, which is under the body's conscious control. Now, smooth or involuntary muscle makes up the walls, the blood and lymph vessels. Right. So if you're exercising and you're working your legs really hard, your body's like, oh man, I gotta get more blood down to the legs. Will pumping the heart faster help out here? Kind of. More blood will go to the legs, but more blood will go to the arms, more blood will go to the head, more blood will go to the lungs. Maybe I don't need that. Maybe I just need more blood in the legs. If I just need more blood in the legs, I can make the blood vessels in my legs bigger. So relatively speaking, more blood goes down into my legs. Your muscles of your legs kind of bloat and fill up with blood. They become a bit bigger. That's the pump that's sometimes referred to as happening after exercise. Your muscles looking bigger. And then the blood was no longer needed. They contract back down again. The regular blood supply starts going there. Similarly, if I swallow food, I talked about only the conscious decision is the first swallow. After that, peristalsis is pushing in. Peristalsis is the muscles around the intestines pushing food through them, pushing it down the esophagus, rolling them around in the stomach, down to the small intestine, down to the large intestine, and out the body, all being pushed down. If something irritates those muscles, they push faster. So if you taste something spicy or something that disagrees with you, triggers your body, you'll push it through quicker, which probably means diarrhea. So if you get diarrhea, it's often because you ate something that disagreed with you. Literally, your muscles like, oh, I don't like this, push this through quicker. Now that can be something that can be a little bit high in fiber, can sometimes do that because it's lumpy and it irritates the muscle. The muscle just like push through. So if you eat high fiber foods, like if you ate like a ton of celery, like you sat down and said, I'm gonna eat lots of celery because it's basically calorie free. Cool. But that's going to travel through your system alarmingly fast. Alright? So, just be aware of that. So, your involuntary muscle can it look smooth? No, not the big kind of side groupings, kind of more or less for that reason. And they look like little spindles sometimes. They've got a kind of fat belly and they've got 2 fine ends. Now, Cardiac muscle is specialized tissue found only in the heart. The muscle there never tires. If we did, we would have serious health problems. What would happen if your heart cramped and gave up? Good, bad? Bad. Terribly, terribly bad. So you have an issue where if your heart runs out of oxygen, it starts to tire. And that means it'll goes into cramp. That means heart attack. So if you're asphyxiating, if your air is not getting into your lungs and oxygen isn't getting to your bloodstream, then you can have a heart attack because your heart cramps up because suddenly it runs out of oxygen for the first time ever. Otherwise, the oxygen-rich blood is coming from the lungs and the heart gets first bite of that. That's why it doesn't tire. Sometimes people ask me, why don't we just do all muscle? Like, why isn't all our muscle cardiac muscle? All your muscle isn't cardiac muscle because A, it would be incredibly expensive to make that in energy terms, and B, your muscles would each need a set of lungs beside them, which is not how we are set up. So yeah, if you pull the heart out of the chest, it will beat for like a second with the remaining energy before it stops. The last little bit of glucose and it'll squeeze once or twice, and that's about it. So it has tremendous ability to squeeze and keep working. It doesn't really fatigue, repairs itself quite well. We don't have, if we had two hearts, it'd be great. We could go like, okay, it's cardiac cycle 2, other heart takes over for a bit. We do not have that. We have one heart. We gotta look after it. You'll notice there that there's a lot of little stripes inside it, and the cardiac cells there are quite densely beside each other. And they're very close to each other, so it means that if you send a shock along one, it travels along the whole lot until it gets down to the end. Now, lastly and most exciting in some way are voluntary muscles. Now, voluntary muscles are... we're pretty concerned about that. Because these are the guys who move us around the place. They're known as skeletal muscles, and what they are is they're the muscles that move you around. So if you want to move your arms around, move your legs around, run around, pick things up, run around, manipulate stuff, they're all the skeletal muscles. They allow and control movement of the body. You want to move around, you're using your skeletal muscles. These are the ones we think of as muscles. And these are the ones that are easiest to train and get bigger. Just the way of these things. Now, your voluntary muscle here, we've got a diagram here, and there's the bone here. They're attached via tendon. And remember I was talking about the epimysium around the outside. You get the paramysium around each bundle of bundles, and then the endomysium around each individual fiber. Yeah, this is your classic arrangement here. You'll see a bit of a white fibrous substance there. That's the tendon. That's attaching the voluntary muscle to the bone. Happy days. Now, let's break down and talk a little bit about myofibrils. Now, I got asked one year a great question. I was asked, where do gorillas get their protein? I was by a vegetarian. I said, they eat little bits of beetles. And I said, yeah, but tiny amounts of beetles. And I said, it is true, it is tiny amounts of beetles. Let me do a bit of research. And I found a couple of studies on it. And the first one is that gorillas have a much longer digestive tract than we do. Now, why? Well, the reason is that along that big digestive tract, they can actually break down cellulose. Now, cellulose is plant fiber. Humans can't really break down cellulose. So the breaking down of plant fiber is done by effectively I've got these bacteria inside my gut. And my gut isn't long enough, and the bacteria aren't tough enough to break down that cellulose. But in a gorilla's gut, much longer gut, they can break that down. And then they can either absorb the products of that, or in the case of cows, definitely, I'm not sure about gorillas, but definitely cows, they actually eat the bacteria. They actually absorb the nutrients from the bacteria. So the bacteria get broken down, and you absorb those, convert those to fatty acids, and convert those fatty acids into protein. So that's where cows get their protein stocks from. So we can't convert cellulose into protein. We need specific protein stocks to build muscle. But cows can, gorillas can. Most of what we would call herbivores can. They can actually convert cellulose into protein to use to build their bodies. We need to take in other direct protein sources. So we need to either eat animals that are made of protein, or eat high protein plant foods, or in some cases ideally both. Now, some people are vegetarians, and you can have a perfectly healthy vegetarian diet. You just need to make sure you get good protein sources in it, and you can have a perfectly healthy vegan diet, but you need to make damn sure you're getting good protein sources in it. So, these muscles then are made up of individual ones called myofibrils, two proteins, actin and myosin. They exist in small sections called sarcomeres inside your muscles. And the sarcomeres are the sections of the muscle divided up by Z lines. You got thin fibers, which are actin, and thick ones called myosin. And these fibers slide past each other. And this is sometimes referred to as the sliding filament model or sliding filament theory, because certain aspects of the model aren't fully understood. So you've got a sarcomere. This is a section within your muscles. So each of those muscle fibers, remember I was talking about those, the individual muscle fibers, and then they're in big bundles, and then they're in bigger bundles. This is down to the individual fiber. This is made up of tons of these little sarcomere units, tons of little actin filaments surrounding big fatter myosin filaments. And when you send in a stimulus, a little electric shock, these guys slide past each other, and it gets shorter and thicker, just like your muscle does in aggregate. So basically, you slide these filaments past each other, they get shorter and thicker. When you put the power in and when you let the power out, it relaxes and springs back to its original size. So that is the sliding filament model of muscle movement, right? Muscles contract in the sliding filament theory. When the muscle contracts, it shortens and thickens, and the Z lines move close together. This is the sarcomeres. This is because the thinner filaments, the actin, slide in between the thicker filaments, the myosin, which causes the sarcomeres to shorten. This requires mitochondria to produce energy, so muscle cells have lots of mitochondria. Spider legs, I believe, work off mostly effectively modified hydraulics instead. They don't have the same sort of muscle fiber, which is why it's much less serious than they lose a limb, as I recall. They don't start to squirt blood or ichor red everywhere. I can do a bit of research on that though, find out if that is how indeed spider legs work. But I believe it's more close to hydraulics how they work. They basically pump fluid in and move them. The muscle molecules also have little cross pegs called cross bridges that act as levers that grab onto the fiber and pull it along, right? If I put 80,000 myosin filaments side by side, they would be 1 millimeter long. So we're talking pretty small, all things considered. Now, just to finish up for today, a little bit of theory in the muscles. Tendons. Your tendon or sinew is a tough band of fibrous connective tissue that usually connects muscle to bone and is capable of withstanding tension. Your tendons are pretty strong. If you get a small tear in a tendon, it's usually not a big problem. You might have a bit of muscle weakness or muscle strain for a while. If you get a complete muscle tear, you often need surgery to reattach it because it's flapping loose. And if that happens, the muscle kind of rolls down and contracts to its full length, which is terrible. My dad severed both his patella tendons in 2 separate incidents, and in both cases, severed patella tendon, he basically can't bend his leg, so he lost all of the strength and ability to move that leg. So the whole thing rolled back. If you tear it, it's like you can actually watch the muscle roll up the leg as it shortens, and then that just has to get pulled back down and reattached. I see sports classes, and I used to tell them that was the same type of injury that Ronaldo got, and they're like, Ronaldo had his porous patella? I said, no, not not Ronaldo from place of Portugal. I mean Ronaldo from Brazil. They go, oh yeah, you mean fat Ronaldo? I was like, he wasn't fat before he tore his patella. Or he wasn't as fat before he tore his patella tendons, but that's the end of him running. There's 2 ways they repair that patella tendon rupture. One way is to effectively shorten the tendon. They take the longer end, they stretch it back to its old position, and they staple it or attach it in place. Now that will curtail your movement, but that's the quick and dirty repair. In people who are better resourced, high performance athletes primarily, they'll often try to remove a tendon from a cadaver and use that instead. And I believe there's minimal difficulty of tissue rejection as a result of that because it's just a tendon that's mostly inorganic. So they often replace them that way. The tendons and muscles tend to work together. Tendons attach bone to muscle, ligaments do bone to bone, and fascia are muscles to muscles. Now, what else I'm going to be covering? In the upcoming week, I'm going to try and get another A&P class in, and we'll probably do the skin, though I've kind of began to do cardiovascular system actually. So we might do this cardiovascular system next. Again, if anyone's got any questions, fire up questions now. The other thing to take a look at, or at least be aware of, is for the assignments, they're going to go up soon. They will be accompanied by due dates. And again, just a reminder, if you have not contacted your class teacher, be that me, be that Kira, be that whoever, please contact your classroom teacher. And if there are any questions, I will give them a minute for questions now. But otherwise, I'm going to be calling it a day and getting back to fixing some of the other problems people have around the place. So yeah, anything else I mentioned about muscles? I might do a bit at some point about ATP and muscles. It's not core to the course, but it's always kind of an interesting topic to take a look at how the muscles convert ATP into energy and how they use it. Then it is, if you get into your biochemistry in university, you get to do the fantastically annoying glycolysis section, which involves like a 26 stage breakdown of how you get from glucose to ATP. We can often just search out glucose gets converted to ATP. By what? A 26 stage process? I do not have the detail here, but it exists. And there's also ways your muscles can convert glycogen into which is the way we store glucose. We convert to a fat called glycogen, which we convert very quickly back to glucose, and then utilize as glucose for the construction of ATP. You'll notice that basically almost all of our ways to make energy to move our muscles around is break glucose down into ATP, use ATP. If you don't have glucose, convert something else to glucose and then use that. There's very little alternative pathways we have. Alrighty, we will leave it there for today. I will be on tomorrow, probably doing some microbiology. There was a lot of response for the bit about COVID-19. I'll do a little bit about vaccinations and strategies for controlling COVID-19 because I feel it's kind of an interesting one to take a look at the moment. In the meantime, I will see you all later. Goodbye.